Vertigo is a 1958 thriller directed by Alfred Hitchcock. John Ferguson is a retired police officer. After his fear of heights contributed to the loss of a fellow officer, he has no interest in returning to work. But an old friend, Gavin, asks him to perform a private investigation of his wife, Madeline. Gavin believes that Madeline has been possessed by the ghost of a vengeful woman. John balks at the idea, but takes the case just for Gavin's peace of mind. He begins to question whether or not it could be true, and in the course of his investigation, he falls in love with Madeline. 2/3 through the film, Madeline seemingly dies, but John learns that this was all a ruse, and that the woman John believed to be Madeline was actually a woman named Judy. Gavin and Judy created this elaborate story so that Gavin could murder his real wife. To understand Vertigo's place in movie history, we needed to tackle the concept of critical reevaluation. Popular consensus of a work of art can take a long time. When the reviews start rolling in for the next big blockbuster or limited release independent film, its initial critical reaction is not so much the final word as it is the beginning of a very long conversation. And yet we always treat it like a dead and buried issue when the critics pan a movie that we believe deserves better. The reality is that films, especially complex films, are often reevaluated years later. It's easy and tempting to mock critics for initially misunderstanding the greatness of a film, but any number of factors could have led to a bad review. Here's an example. Stanley Kubrick's greatest films were not as beloved in their contemporaneous evaluations from critics. 2001: A Space Odyssey went over the heads of audiences because it was unlike anything ever made before. The Shining was absolutely loathed by many and even given a Golden Raspberry nomination. Now it's considered one of the best horror movies ever made. A Clockwork Orange had some mixed reviews as well, and Eyes Wide Shut is only recently being seen as one of Kubrick's best, instead of how it was seen at the time, one of his worst. I could go on and on with examples. The Big Lebowski was originally seen as a disappointment, and now it's arguably the Coen brothers' most famous film. Lots of critics panned Fight Club, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, and so many more. Honestly, I could make a whole video about reevaluation of films, and how modern interpretation has invalidated initial critical responses, but we really should move on. If there's one film that reigns supreme as the pinnacle of critical 180-degree turns, it's Vertigo. Originally given only mixed reviews upon release, Vertigo is now the consensus #1 film of all time, according to the Sight and Sound poll of film professionals. As comparison to other polls, Roger Ebert once called the Sight and Sound Greatest Films list by far the most respected of the countless polls of great movies, the only one most serious movie people take seriously. To contextualize this in a modern setting, it would be as if Southpaw, the recent Jake Gyllenhaal film with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 59% as of this writing, was declared the greatest film of all time in about 50 years. Vertigo has skyrocketed in critical estimation in about the 50 years since its release. So why do people think it's so great? Let's figure this out. Manipulation. Psychological manipulation. Vertigo delves into the way our lives and perceptions are manipulated, both by ourselves and our own delusions, but also through external sources, manipulation from those who see themselves as our superiors. Let's first study our own self-manipulation, our creation of identity, and the loss of it. In the beginning of the film, we examine a woman's face. As the credits progress, we zoom closer to the eye. In film, and art in general, eyes are used to convey sense of self, the window to the soul. The title of the film comes directly out of the eye, suggesting that this sense of vertigo is not so much about feeling dizzy as it is feeling the loss of identity, unbalance. Then, the spiral appears. The spiral reoccurs when the police officer falls, and then again when we see his body on the ground in a spiraled shape. When John follows Madeline to the art gallery, the camera zooms in to a tightly wound bun, or another spiral. This foreshadows Madeline having a complicated identity. And right before Madeline seemingly dies, we see a spiraling staircase become twisted from John's point of view. Sense of identity and the loss of it is played up several times in the film. For example, I am calling the protagonist John here to keep everything orderly, but in the film, he is called several names. His name is John Ferguson, but some people call him Scotty as a nickname. When he finally spends time with Madeline after following her, they have a conversation about what she should call him. John, Scotty, or Mr. Ferguson. Different people in his life call him different names, depending on their level of familiarity, or when they initially meet him and under what circumstances.
Do your friends call you John or Jack?
Oh, John, mostly. Old friends call me John. Acquaintances call me Scotty.
The concepts of freedom and power the freedom in one's life, and the power to have agency in it tie into the sense of identity. Gavin tells John that he misses the old San Francisco. Back then, he says, he could have power and freedom. Upon investigating the case, John speaks to a bookstore owner named Pop, who remarks that men once had the freedom and the power to abandon their wives. In this case, the notion of control, of power and freedom, take a sinister meaning. The words power and freedom reoccur yet again in the final scene as John manhandles Madeline, now revealed as Judy. Our sense of freedom, of identity, of agency, is not only fragile, but potentially dangerous. John is manipulated by Gavin, almost to the point of being found guilty of Madeline's death at a hearing. Gavin wants power and freedom for himself, but believes that complete power is control over others. Gavin's words aren't the only warning about his true nature, though. His office is covered in red, a symbol of warning, of blood, of death. Color symbolism is more prominently featured as it pertains to Madeline. The color green appears in connection to the uncanny. When John and Madeline are in the forest, he calls a tree always green, ever living. Madeline, too, is a figure that allegedly dies but goes on living. Once Judy drops her Madeline persona, we see green again, and again, and again. Green is Madeline's color, an uncanny being whose existence confuses John's sense of reality.
Why? Does that remind you of her?
Everything about Madeline is fabricated. She tries to fool John into believing she is half ghost of a long-dead woman named Carlotta and half Gavin's wife. The truth is, she's neither of those things. She is really a woman named Judy, who is taking on two roles at once, neither of them real. Death, both as fear and as fascination, surround this film. It is given form through a bouquet of flowers. While the tree is a representation of her false self, always living, the flowers represent Madeline's true self, or Judy's true self. Fragile. She is seen picking it apart and tossing the petals into the bay before diving in. Self-destruction. During John's nightmare, the bouquet swirls around and disappears. This isn't only about life being fragile. The flowers are the physical manifestation of an idea, that death can be attractive. Vertigo is adapted from a novel, but that's only its direct influence. Its indirect influence appears to come from ancient Greek mythology, specifically Orpheus. In the myth, Orpheus travels to the underworld to rescue his wife, only to lose her again. John loses Madeline at the clock tower, and then when he gets another chance with her, he loses her again in exactly the same way. Vertigo is the destruction and subversion of the rescue fantasy. The idea of wanting to save someone, but really only wanting to keep that person around for yourself. When John gets a second chance at love, thinking Judy and Madeline are completely different people, he goes about dressing up Judy to look more like Madeline. It's sick, and it shows that the rescue fantasy is more about the rescuer than the person being rescued.
One shouldn't live alone.
Some people prefer it,
No, it's wrong.
In a way, Vertigo is about rejecting fantasy altogether. Midge, John's friend, serves as a grounding force in his life. She would be the perfect mate for him, smart, kind, successful, talented, but John is more interested in chasing a dream than going after what's offered to him, a wonderful woman who obviously loves him. Gavin may have manipulated him, Judy may have lied to him, but it's John who walked the path. It's John who didn't take the happiness that was right in front of him, and he suffered for it.